and 1. What is this debate about? This debate is a debate quite uniquely about strategy. A debate focusing on how the government ought to act to ensure that these failing industries are able to harm as little people as possible. Coming from Joseph, it's very clear what our side champions. Joseph explains how the burden of opposition is in operating under our worst case. That is to say, the only time all of opposition's benefits is able to unlock all of the impacts that they think wins them the round is when they are pushed towards making the last and most severe decision in allowing governments to use their fiscal budget to save a dying industry. Joseph posits a really simple question. Why should it be exclusively governments? This is what opposition bench has failed to prove as thus far in this round. A lot of responses to opposition bench. 1. LO says that there is a risk of recession and that this industry is important. Joseph's POI about the private sector incentivizes because they want to earn response to that harm as opposed to the state having to step in. Given that in times of crises, the state is preoccupied with making sure national services work and that the borders are safe, just like as to what we saw in COVID, it shows a better opportunity for the private sector to take that particular risk. In the worst case, then the industry is forced to innovate, forced to pivot, forced to restructure if they don't want to get wrecked. 2. The reason why the private sector funding and involvement is better is because they are less proximate to the government and often have more money to be able to spend. Their literal business models are that of vulture fund, like hedge funds, and investment banks whose opportunity is precisely during these times. There is too much risk with the state and the priority for governments are divided during times of crisis. We'd rather have them do social welfare that affects all people versus salvage a zombie industry that gets cooked even if they were that important. Thirdly, when shitty industries and businesses refuse to innovate, like Nokia, AMC, Movie House, BlackBerry, Kodak, the governments did not bail them out. They just continue to exist, albeit less important and influential for obvious reasons. The harm when governments bail you out is that it sets a dangerous precedent to take shitty financial decisions and take disproportionate risks. This leads to poor decision-making because you rely on the state to solve your problems for them. Lastly, on DLO's call out of us being idealistic. My problem with opposition is that they assume the benefits of bailouts without first proving effectivity and fail to engage with our analysis where we tell you the threshold of our cash infusion needed to attain their benefits simply is incredibly unlikely to happen and has basically never happened. Chair, this debate ought to be weighed on two very clear clashes and main metrics. 1. In which side is the state a lot more capable of providing goods and services that protect the most amount of people in times of failing industries or in times of crisis? 2. In which side are we able to actually avoid future mistakes and failing industries to happen to begin with? Exchange 1. On the capability of the state as the best possible actor in providing this policy. What does Joseph say that as of right now still hasn't been properly dealt with? He said 3 things. 1. The bailouts of these industries are probably the worst case scenario for these states. This is because the budget allocated towards the government is finite and saving these industries are a money sink at the point in which bailing out these industries take a lot more money to resuscitate as opposed to letting it die. How does LO try to respond to this? She doesn't really. In fact, she takes quite a narrow way in saying, no, the government will not just give them hey, we'll just let the governments give them loans and we'll be a lot smarter about it. Problem, LO doesn't provide sufficient enough justification to why we should bail out. Because LO does this sneaky thing where they say we have other alternatives. If there are other alternatives, then we think the clash coming from them has not been incredibly clear so far. Joseph's exclusivity points out insofar as governments have a lot of opportunities and a lot of avenues for acting, bailouts are not of primary action. This is me being extremely charitable to side opposition, specifically because their case only works insofar as everything has gone bad and they're all of those other alternatives that Joseph and Andre have said don't work anymore. Weighing this, the role of the state is integral, but it has certain limitations. Our side just aligns with the financial reality of how each of these states are likely to operate under. opposition seems to agree because I don't think they're backtracking all of their rebuttals to their whip. Two, if not bailouts, why do we support governments? Like, what do we support governments doing? Because let's be clear, right? We're still going to help out people. We will help them through social welfare, through remittances, through all of the things that Joseph said in his speech. Making sure that all of those proximate to the workers who get affected and not the rich people who prop up these businesses. How does Opbench respond? They say we leave people out in the streets. Hold on, I don't really understand that call out. If you don't have the money, they do, but they're the ones giving the money to these companies. But both can't be true, right? Opposition cannot have their cake and eat it too. But let's be charitable. Given the limited amount of budget that opposition says governments have, we think that's precisely the point in which the private sector ought to come in because the government is as poor as they say. So, if that were true, all of Andre's extension has to be able to take out them. Before the third one, go up.
We already explained why private sector is not also going to be willing to give you credit because of the lack of confidence of repayment. Your alternative simply is nonsense.
No, man, because legit, as to what Joseph explains, I mean, all of this is already preempted by the first speaker, right? As to you say, if you guys agree with us that these industries are as important as you say, then there's probably going to be incentive enough to be able to actually at least have a marginal interest in actually getting all of these industries, right? So if you agree with us on that, you have to agree with us on this. Thirdly, absent bailouts, failing industries are able to provide a plethora of other opportunities. And this is really where Andre takes the stage, right? Elo asks the question, well, how is this private partnerships better? Andre actually answers this in his speech. A, the state has tons of other responsibilities to be able to put it off. In a perfect world, money is infinite and the state can literally do anything that it wants. But given the imperfectness of our world, you at the very least allow the private sector with a lot more incentive and capacity to invest if they want to invest. B, I don't understand why OP is opposed with external factors or is obsessed with external factors outside of the country. We think companies within the state themselves have enough incentive and capacity to be able to work together with these failing industries to save them as well. Check your notes, Joseph explained this. Lastly then, why do we win? Let's assume the metrics of DLO is really what we follow. We think governments are a lot more resilient on our side for the sole purpose that the ability for governments to utilize their funds is a lot more long-termist. Again, these industries are point at failure for a reason. These zombie industries, as Andre explained, are way too expensive to resuscitate. Look, at this point in the round, PM and DPM have responded to all major points of opposition's argument. LO and DLO haven't even responded to one. We think it's too late for WHIP to solve or to resuscitate their case. For all of those reasons, very, very proud to propose.